This is Avalon Hill's Victory in the Pacific. Today I'm providing corrections and additions to my earlier Turn 1 video. When I did that video, I relied on memory alone for the rules for a game I had not played in 40 years. I made 3 mistakes. Right, so this situation is the end of Turn 1, near the end, almost the end of Turn 1. And now let's see what the corrections do. So, mistake 1. British, Dutch, and Australian ships can only move 2 spaces. Therefore, the 2 Australian cruisers, which started in Australia, couldn't reach Japan or the Marianas. So the final Allied move remains the same, where those ships go here and here, and these ships go here. But the Japanese can reduce their patrollers in the 2 home areas, here and here. Mistake 2 is that the American carrier groups arrive on turn 2 on 4 to 6 and near Hawaii on 2 or 3. I had those 2 categories switched. With the actual dice rolled, that puts these 3 carrier groups with the turn 2 forces, and the Saratoga winds up over here. So that's the 3 carrier groups here, and the Saratoga's down there, and the Enterprise, which was sunk, doesn't sink, doesn't get shot at because it's not there. Mistake 3 is that the Pearl Harbor raid is not limited to 10 ships. That's the historical force. But in this game, you can bring more. So what I'm going to do is send all 4 Congos to Pearl Harbor, plus 4 Takeos. This force should have overwhelming superiority against anything the Americans might have. Now, where are those 4 ships coming from? 1 comes from Japan, 1 from Marianas, 2 from Central Pacific, and we reorganize what's left. So like this, adding 2 raiding Congos there, and 2 cruisers there. Now, I could add a couple small carriers here, send them there, but I want some air cover in the Central Pacific in case American carriers arrive there. Meanwhile, there's already 1 million cruisers here, so we can comfortably remove some of them. So reorganizing, like that. So that'll basically be the force. And we have to do 2 new speed rolls. 2 battleships went here instead of Congos, and they're slower, so there's a different speed roll. And we roll the dice, and both ships fail. Now, it's possible that these both fail their speed rolls, and then there's only 2 patrollers here, and then the Allies could put 3 small cruisers here against 2 battleships, 2 cruisers, and, you know, they might break the patrollers, but it's basically a suicide run. So we don't allow for that. We don't We can't worry about those kind of things. So the Pearl Harbor raid, we need to do it more carefully. I just did it on an ad hoc basis and skimmed through it. So after checking the rules, air raids do not get any special bonuses, and I wasn't quite sure of that last time, but there's nothing extra. So after the first 2 airstrikes, the Japanese may retreat, and since I brought a ton more ships, I'm not retreating. I'm staying. Incidentally, the sub, it's this guy here, is placed before we know where the American carriers go. So you can't quite follow them around on this turn. But Hawaii is still the best place for that unit to go by a long shot. So the next thing is we determine where the American carriers go and what we're going to keep the original die rolls. And what happened is these guys are showing up on turn 2, and the Saratoga comes in here. It doesn't have any help. So next in the sequence is the sub attacks, and the sub attacked. I'm not going to redo the die roll. It rolled a 3, it rolled a hit, and it rolled a 3, and that means the Saratoga is alive but crippled, so it can't move very fast, and it can't launch, and it can't use airplanes. So it's not a carrier. It's like it's a 104 or something like that. So having done all this, the Allies now assess. What do the Allies have? They have 1 Air Force here. They have 2 damaged battleships. They have 4 cruisers and the crippled Saratoga. And the Japanese have a bunch of carriers, and there's 4 battleship types and 4 cruisers. So the Americans are running. Now, if multiple American carrier groups arrived here and they got a day action, well, no, if it's a day action, the Japanese have all these things, and it doesn't matter how many American carriers go. The Japanese are happy to trade carrier for carrier in the early game. So if the American carriers show up in force there and it's a day action, then the game is basically over. The Japanese win on turn 1. So the Americans would have to go for a night action and hope to have more screening ships. They have 6 right now. There's 8 here, so if they got 2 cruisers, they could maybe start putting battleships against carriers. But yeah. The point is that's not a strong contender. It might work for the Americans, or they might lose immediately, might lose the whole game. In any case, that didn't happen. There's only 1 lone carrier. The Japanese have overwhelming force, and so the Americans have to run. Now, next in the sequence is the Japanese get 2 more air raid rounds. And these 6 crippled ships, a total of 41 damage on them so far. It takes just a couple more hits. It's going to be, 2 rounds each. They're dead. No, I'm not going to bother rolling that. And that flag is gone because there's no American patrollers here anymore after they ran away. And so that's gone. And that's going to shift the victory point track by 3 to 7. And 7 victory points for the Japanese is the standard turn 1 result. Okay, extras. So first of all, the historical result was 2 American battleships destroyed and 5 put out of action for at least 2 months, and some of them for years. And almost 200 planes were lost. And my result was 0 battleships destroyed, 6 put out of action, needing extensive repairs, 41 total damage, which would need 5 turns to restore them all, and 0 airplanes damaged. So that's quite a bit worse than the historical result, and that can be attributed to bad dice. But in the end, we're going to get 2 more airstrikes and they're all dead. So that's 6 battleships eliminated and 2 slightly damaged. These guys. And that's much, much better than a historical result. And the second thing I want to discuss is what happens in the Central Pacific, or doesn't happen. So a major weakness of this game is that there are many critical points where the game can basically be won or lost purely on extreme dice. And the turn 1 location of the American carriers is the worst offender. So we can easily do the math. 48% of the time, it's a null result, which means nothing shows up there, and this Japanese force strikes at thin air. Well, the Marine, which in this variation I decided would sack midway, does its job. Otherwise, these guys don't shoot at anything. Now, 46% of the time, 1 to 3 American carriers show up with weak screening forces and they get sunk, and the Japanese basically win the game right there. The Americans need their carriers to fight against, well, not so much the Japanese carriers, but the Japanese land base there, because otherwise, Japanese land base there just sits there, and cruisers, battleships, doesn't matter, they can't do anything. So you need your carriers to fight against those, and you only have 5 or 6. So if you lose a bunch here on turn 1, then basically you can't contest the early game, and so the victory track goes all the way to the end, and that's going to be a Japanese win. 46% of the time. And then you have the 6% of the time when 3 to 5 American carriers show up, and the flag advantage, which was actually American to start, means the Americans can do serious damage because the Japanese only have a couple small carriers. They do have a lot of surface ships. So night action would be very painful if, say, the Americans show up with, 3 carriers, and in the day action, these guys kill 1, and the Japanese lose all their carriers, and then you get a night action, and these guys hit the screeners, and battleships hit the carriers, and the Americans lose 3 carriers, and the Japanese lose, like, these things, which they're not worth much. The game's over. The Americans can't win that game. So even if in 6% of the times the Americans show up with a lot of carriers, even if they win, it may be a Pyrrhic victory. Night action, incidentally, if you work it out, it's a 30% chance. And night action is very bad if there's a bunch of American carriers showing up without battleship support. So I wanted to get into that. Anyway, that covers the corrections, covers the extras, and we're done for this.